In this video, I'm going to show you the 2-workout, 2-set method men over 40 are using to gain muscle so fast it feels illegal. I'm Rio and I've helped hundreds of men over 40 transform their bodies with this exact system. I even used it myself to go from this to this. So if you're tired of wasting hours in the gym, unhappy with how you look, and confused about what actually works after 40, I'm going to break down this method step by step so you can start gaining muscle and strength fast. So the way this works is you're going to train full body twice a week. You're gonna have a workout A, which you're gonna do on Monday or Tuesday, and then you're gonna have a workout B, which you're gonna do on Thursday or Friday. So between these workouts, you're gonna leave 72 hours of rest. So here's why this works so well for men over 40. The first reason is recovery. So when you only train twice a week on a full body setup and you leave 72 hours of rest between sessions, you gain muscle quicker because you're actually fully recovering between workouts and allowing your body the time it needs to get bigger and stronger, because muscle is built outside of the gym during rest and recovery, not during your workouts. The second reason is intensity. So when you only train twice a week and you leave plenty of rest time between sessions, you go into your workouts fully recovered and fresh, and that allows you to actually push much harder in those workouts and thus stimulate more muscle growth, as opposed to being in the gym 5 days a week and going into your workouts tired and just going through the motions in those workouts. The third reason is progress. When you train just twice a week, you'll literally be able to gain strength on your exercises every single week because you're no longer burnt out. You're going into your workouts fully fresh, and that allows you to consistently push into new ground and get stronger consistently. My clients, oftentimes before they work with me, are training 5 to 6 days a week on bodybuilding routines, and they're completely stagnant. They haven't gained an ounce of strength. And then once they start training just twice a week, all of a sudden, they're able to get stronger on a weekly basis because they're going into their workouts recovered and with the ability to consistently add some weight to the bar, to add some reps. The fourth reason is sustainability. So training just twice a week is obviously a lot more sustainable than training 5 days a week, especially if you're over 40 and you have a career, you have a family, you have other responsibilities. Ultimately, the key to building a great body and staying healthy is consistency. And consistency stems from sustainability. And everyone can sustain 2 workouts per week. It is incredibly sustainable no matter how busy you are. It's literally just 2 hours per week out of your schedule. And everyone has that. And if this all sounds a little crazy to you, like the idea of training just twice a week, all you have to do is look back to how men built their physiques before steroids. This was the norm. This is how men trained before steroids completely ruined the fitness industry. Back in the day, like in the 40s and 50s, when bodies were a product of actually sound fitness practices rather than drug abuse, men built incredible bodies training just 2 to 3 times per week on brief, full body routines. Think of guys like John Grimmick, Reg Park, Steve Reeves. This is not new. This is the rediscovered way that men used to build their physiques before steroids. By the way, if you're over 40 and serious about dropping fat and building muscle, I just opened my new 8-week Lean and Strong Challenge. So here's how it works. You put down $500, follow a few simple rules like hitting 2 workouts a week, logging your food, and checking in with me. And if you follow the rules, you win your $500 back as store credit to keep going. So best case, you follow through, get results, and roll that credit into bigger goals. Worst case, you still walk away with 8 weeks of structure, accountability, and real progress. So spots are limited and they're first come, first serve, and the price goes up $100 every 10 signups. So click the link in my description now to grab your spot. So now that you understand why this setup works so well for men over 40, let's get straight into the workouts so you can actually start using this yourself. So this is the general structure that I would recommend for a full body twice a week setup. In each workout, you're gonna do 6 exercises. 3 of them are going to be compound exercises and the other 3 are going to be isolation exercises. And so you need to understand the difference between compound and isolation exercises. Compound exercises are multi-joint, multi-muscle movements that work a lot of muscle in your body. These are your bread and butter exercises. These are the movements that are going to pack the most muscle and strength onto your frame. And that's actually why we start with them first. You always want to start with the compound exercises when you're fresh because they're the most important and because they're the most demanding. They're the most strenuous. And then you want to finish off with 3 isolation exercises in order to bring up weak links and to basically plug the gaps that might be left by these these compound exercises. Now, for all of these exercises, you're going to want to do just 2 working sets. Now, the reason why I recommend doing just 2 sets per exercise is because it's going to allow you to train a lot harder and thus stimulate more muscle growth. So one of the pioneers of effective weight training, also the mentor of Mike Mentzer, Arthur Jones, he had a saying where he said, you can either train long or you can train hard, but you can't do both. And so fundamentally, what we are doing by doing just 2 sets versus doing more is we're trading volume for intensity. We're choosing to do fewer sets, but we're gonna push these sets with more effort. And that's actually much more productive for stimulating muscle growth because the actual duration and quantity of training that you do doesn't really matter that much. What matters is how hard you can train, because in order to damage your muscles, you need to train hard. So basically what happens is that a lot of people, they do, 5 sets per exercise, let's say, and what happens is that they end up putting like 60% effort into these sets, right? And that's actually not very productive from a muscle growth standpoint because you need to push your sets close to failure. And this is something that you can even experiment with yourself. If you go into your workout next time, try doing 5 sets for any given exercise, and then try doing 2 sets for that same exercise the next week. And you're gonna see that you're gonna approach the sets that you're doing with a completely different mindset. With the 5 sets, you're gonna go into it like thinking like, oh shit, like I got 5 sets to get through. I better hold myself back. I better conserve my energy and intensity in order to get through it all. So what happens is that you do 5 sets with half-assed effort. And then if you do just 2 sets per exercise, you're gonna put 100% effort because it's a completely different mindset. It's a mindset of like, oh shit, I only have 2 sets. I better make these 2 sets count. So you actually push these 2 sets with a lot more effort. And that is more productive for stimulating muscle growth than just going through the motions on a bunch of sets. So with more sets, your effort and focus is diluted. With fewer sets, your effort and focus is not diluted. You push it a lot harder and you stimulate more muscle growth as a result. So now that you understand the general structure of the routine, let's talk about how to pick the exercises that you're going to do in your workouts. So to pick your exercises, you're gonna follow a framework I use called the Core 6. This is the simplest, most direct exercise selection framework known to man. It's incredibly simple and it's very, very powerful. A lot of people are very up in the clouds when it comes to picking exercises, but it's actually really simple. This is a very principled framework that will make sure that you're covering all your bases and that you're not missing out on any muscle groups. So the Core 6 stems from the idea that there are only actually 6 core movement patterns that exist for human beings. And essentially all we want to do is look at those 6 movement patterns, hence the Core 6, and we want to pick one big compound exercise for each of those movement patterns. So as far as movement patterns, we have squats, hip hinges, vertical pushes, vertical pulls, horizontal pushes, and horizontal pulls. One of the reasons that I really like to think of exercises through the frame of movement patterns is because there's no one size fits all for exercises, right? There are so many exercises that work. In fact, all exercises pretty much work. The question is, what exercises work best for you? That's why I like to give movement patterns as a general framework instead of saying do these 6 exercises, because there are multiple movements that could work really well for you within each of these movement patterns. And what you want to do is you want to find out what is like a key exercise, a big compound exercise for each of these movement patterns that works really well for me. And then those are going to be the movements that you're going to keep as the foundation of your workout routine, and you're just gonna focus on mastering those exercises and getting as strong as possible at them over time. You're really not gonna change those exercises very much. They're gonna be like the crux, like the foundation of everything that you do in the gym. And honestly, the quality of your physique and how much muscle you build will always be in direct proportion to how strong you can get at your Core 6. So I'll give you some examples for each of these movement patterns of exercises that you can pick from. So as far as squats, you could do barbell squats, leg presses, hack squats. Keep in mind there are obviously more for each of these movement patterns. I'm just giving you a few examples. As far as hip hinges, you could do Romanian deadlifts, conventional deadlifts, or stiff-legged deadlifts. For vertical pushes, you could do a seated dumbbell overhead press, you could do a barbell overhead press, or you could do a machine overhead press. For vertical pulls, you can do chin-ups, pull-ups, or lat pull-downs. For horizontal pushes, you could do dumbbell bench presses, both incline and flat, barbell bench presses, incline and flat as well, or you could do a machine bench press. For horizontal pulls, you could do barbell rows, dumbbell rows, or machine rows. So all you got to do is find out which exercise works best for me for each of these movement patterns, and then pick that and then stick with it for a very long time, get very strong at it, master it, and that's going to be pretty much all you need to do to develop your physique. And then as far as how to pick the isolation exercises, which if you remember are the single joint movements that are there to basically act as like the icing on top of the cake to bring up weak points, plug the gaps left by these movements. All you want to do is look at your physique and ask yourself, like, what's lagging behind? What do I feel like is weak or imbalanced? What do I feel like is not getting hit that hard through the compound exercises alone, through the core 6? And that's where you want to allocate some isolation work, right? That's where you're going to basically allocate like the final 3 exercises of each of those full body routines that I showed you. So examples of those could be bicep curls, could be lateral raises, could be calf raises, could be direct ab work, could be direct neck work, could be rear delt work. The options are really limitless. You have to basically figure that out for yourself. You have to find out what are your weak links and then allocate some isolation work to those weak links. And that's basically it. So now that you understand the workout structure and you understand how to pick the exercises that you're going to do in those workouts, let's talk about how to actually perform the sets. So as far as the rep range that you're going to be working in for the sets that you're going to do, honestly, anything between 5 and 20 reps stimulates muscle growth as long as the sets are taken close to failure and you progressively overload them over time. But obviously that's very vague and that's not really going to help you. So what I'm gonna recommend is that for the compound exercises, you're going to do between 6 to 12 reps on your sets. For the isolation exercises, that's gonna be anywhere from 8 to 20. Always keep in mind that when it comes to sets and reps, like the most important thing is always effort and progressive overload, right? It's not about trying to hit some magic rep range. It's about pushing hard with anything between 5 and 20 reps, pushing those sets close to failure and adding weight to them over time. Like that's more important than hitting some magic rep number. As far as how to actually conduct your sets, I recommend using a training style that I've coined called the Polarity training method. So as you can recall, you're gonna be doing just 2 sets per exercise. Now, there are a lot of different ways that people like to conduct their sets, but the way that I prefer to do it is I prefer to start with the heavier set first and then to finish off with a lighter set. So a lot of people like to do straight sets across, where they use the same weight on every single set, or they like to do pyramid training to where they start light and they work their way up so that they finish with the heaviest set last. I prefer to flip the script and actually start with a heavier set first and then take some weight off and go for a lighter back down set where you actually go for a couple more reps. So for example, on your first set of a given exercise, you might do 6 to 8 reps, and then you're gonna rest, and then you're gonna reduce the weight by about 10%. And then on the second set, you're gonna go for 8 to 10 reps. So you're dropping the weight, you're going for a lighter back down set, and then you're gonna go for a couple more reps. I think this is really, really effective because oftentimes when you're doing straight sets, there's an unproductive psychological effect that's going on to where you know you have to do that same weight multiple times. So you don't actually push as hard as you can on those sets because you're sort of holding yourself back because you know you have to do it again. The magic of this training style is that you start with the heaviest set first and you know that you only have to do it once before you can go a little bit lighter. So it creates this psychological effect to where you push really, really hard on this first set, which is always the most important set when you're fresh. And then you can relax a little bit, go a little bit lighter, go for a couple more reps. So I think this is honestly the best way to train. I also think there's a really good effect to where when you go really heavy on the first set, you achieve like upper threshold muscle fiber recruitment, which basically means that after the first set, the subsequent sets are more effective because you're actually using more muscle on the following sets than you would if you had started with that weight. Hopefully that makes sense, but since you're going heavy first and you're recruiting a lot more muscle fibers, you're actually getting more out of the following sets because you're still using maximum muscle fiber recruitment. That's why when you start really heavy and then you go a bit lighter, that lighter weight, even though it might be heavy, feels really easy. It's because you're using more muscle than you otherwise would have, because if you had just started with that light weight, it would still feel pretty challenging. So this is the training style that I would strongly recommend for the compound exercises, your core 6. And you can use this for every single exercise in your routine, no problem. But oftentimes with the smaller isolation exercises, I like to do just simple straight sets across. The reason being is isolation exercises are generally less demanding, so there's not really a need to like go really heavy on the first set and then go really light on the second set. I prefer to just go light in general and then just use the same weight across multiple sets. And it's also less of a pain in the ass because you're not having to constantly like switch the weight. So the way that this would look is like, let's say you're doing 2 sets. You'd simply do, let's say 8 to 10 on the first set and then 8 to 10 on the second set with the same weight. Now you're probably wondering, how long should I rest between these sets? Well, for compound exercises, I'd recommend resting between 3 to 5 minutes between sets. One thing that I've seen as a very common trend working with a lot of men over 40 is that a lot of them tend to not rest enough between sets. They're in a rush, they're trying to get through their workouts quickly, so they do a set of an exercise, they rest like 30 seconds, maybe 60 seconds, and then they get into the next set. But if you're doing compound exercises, that is nowhere near sufficient. Like you should never rest less than 3 minutes between sets on compound exercises. If you're actually pushing hard, you should not be able to rest less than 3 minutes. And so the whole general idea behind rest time is that you want to rest long enough to where you can replicate the same level of intensity on the second set or the third set or whatever. You need to be able to replicate that same level of intensity. You do not want to get into the next set until you feel like you can do that, because that second set is going to be junk. You know what I mean? Because like if you would have rested a little bit longer, you might have been able to squeeze out like multiple more reps and actually stimulate more muscle growth. So you end up doing a lot of junk volume that's not really productive. Like I would always rather my clients do just 2 sets and like take a long time of rest between the sets than to try and do like 4 or 5 sets and like try and rest really short time periods between them in order to squeeze in a lot of volume. Like when it comes to weight training, it's always quality over quantity. So you never want to rest less than 3 minutes between sets. In fact, on exercises like squats or deadlifts, like big leg exercises, oftentimes you'll need closer to 5 minutes. But a lot of upper body exercises like bench press, overhead press, chin-ups, oftentimes you can get away with just 3 minutes. Now for isolation exercises, 1 to 2 minutes is fine. These exercises are a lot less strenuous, so you really don't need that much rest time between sets in order to be able to replicate your performance. You know, like if you're doing a bicep curl, it's like that's not going to completely destroy your system. But if you're doing a squat and you're pushing that close to failure, like that's going to be incredibly strenuous on your system. Your body's going to need more rest time to recover from that. But like smaller exercises that don't recruit so much muscle mass in your body, you only need to rest between 1 to 2 minutes. Now, I cannot stress this enough. The most important thing to keep in mind here is that all the sets that you do in the gym should be pushed to around 0 reps in reserve, meaning that you need to squeeze out every single rep that you can do using good form on every single set. So remember, the whole idea with doing just 2 sets per exercise is that we want to push them harder, right? So if you do just 2 sets, but you go through the motions on them as if you were doing 5 sets, it completely defeats the purpose. The reason why we do fewer sets is so that we can put more effort into them. So a lot of people think like this is a lazy way to train. It's not at all. It's actually oftentimes more difficult than doing a lot of volume but going through the motions. Like you're gonna have to push these sets hard. That's the only way that you're gonna be able to make this 2 workout 2 set method actually work for you. Like you have to adopt the mindset of like effort over quantity. Now you might be wondering if you have to warm up for these sets or not. The answer is yes, and I'll tell you exactly how to warm up. So I have a very simple philosophy when it comes to warming up for training. I don't believe in general warm-ups where you run on the treadmill for 5 minutes in order to break a sweat. All you need to do to warm up is just do a couple light sets that ramp up to the heavy set. And you only ever have to do warm-up sets for the compound lifts that you're doing at the beginning of your training session. So the way that I like to do it is like, let's say I'm warming up for like this sort of sequence here. What I'm gonna do is I'm going to look at the weight that I'm gonna use on the first set here, and I'm gonna do 50% of that weight for about 6 reps. And then for the second warm-up set, I might do 70% of that weight for 3 reps. Oftentimes, 2 warm-up sets is all you really need for getting into training. The whole idea is that you want to do the minimum amount that you need in order to feel physically and psychologically ready to get into lifting heavy weight. That's it. You just want to get some blood flowing to where this is going to feel smooth. And you also want to get yourself psychologically prepared to get into some heavy weight, because if you just jump straight into the first set, like you might not injure yourself, but it's going to feel really, really heavy. Whereas if you take your time to, warm up and get yourself psychologically prepared, it's going to feel a lot easier, right? So if you're someone who needs more warming up, maybe you're going to do a third set of 80% of that first working set weight for 1 rep. And then after this, you're gonna wanna rest 3 minutes and then get into your working sets. So at this point, you have the entire routine set up. The only thing missing is a progression method. And so a lot of people are missing a progression method to guide their strength gain over time. A lot of people do not have a system in place for actually making progress. And that's why a lot of people never get to where they want to go with their muscle and strength building pursuits. You can follow the routine I've laid out up until this point, and you can do that. But if you're not adding weight to the bar over time, you're not progressively overloading your exercises, literally nothing's gonna change. Like, this is the missing piece for most people. And without this, like, nothing that we've talked about so far is gonna work whatsoever. So I recommend that for your progression method, you're gonna use something called double progression. So the double progression method is a way to progress with both reps and weight. So if you recall, you're gonna be doing 2 sets per exercise. Let's take that example from earlier where you're doing 6 to 8 reps on the first set and then 8 to 10 on the second set. So one thing you might have noticed is that with these sets, you're working in a rep range instead of just trying to hit one specific rep target. And the reason this rep range exists is to guide the double progression method. So let's take an example. Let's say you're doing squats, and on your first workout after watching this video, you're gonna go in and you're going to do, let's say, 200 pounds for 6 reps on your first set. What you're gonna do is on week 2, you're gonna try to get 7 reps on that set. So you've added a rep. And then on week 3, you're gonna try to get 8 reps. And once you've hit 8 reps, you've hit the top end of the rep range. And it's at this point where you want to add some weight. So that's why it's called double progression. You're either progressing with reps or you're progressing with weight. And the rep range exists to guide that process. So once you hit 8, on week 4, you're gonna go up to 205 pounds. And what you're gonna do is you're going to go for 6 reps. So you're gonna drop to the bottom of the rep range. So essentially, you're progressing with reps, and then when you hit the top end of the rep range, you add some weight, and then you drop to the bottom of the rep range, and then you literally just repeat this process over and over again. So on week 5, you're gonna try and get 205 pounds for 7, and then 205 pounds for 8. And then once you hit 8, you're gonna go up to 210 pounds. So it's really, really simple. And you wanna do that for all your sets. The way I've listed it out here makes it seem like you're just gonna linearly gain a rep every single week and it's all gonna be fine and dandy. But realistically, that's not really how it works in the real world. There might be some weeks where you're literally stuck at, let's say, 200 for 6 for like 2 or 3 weeks. Like, that's just the nature of weight training. It's not really linear unless you're like a brand new beginner. Oftentimes, like, it's going to be a slow process, and I would strongly recommend, if you are over 40, take this process slow. Really listen to your body. I have some clients who we've made it like a rule for them. Once they hit like a certain amount of reps with a given amount of weight, I literally tell them, like, hey, like, stick with that exact target for like 2 weeks. Do not add weight. Like, if you get to the point here where you're doing 200 for 8 and technically it's time to add some weight, but you feel like, holy shit, this is really heavy, I think it's gonna be a little dangerous adding some weight, then just stick with that for like 2 to 3 weeks until you master and you get really, really comfortable with it, and then you can add some weight. So don't be sort of fooled here. Like, this is not a linear process. It's gonna take some time, and the worst thing that you can do is try and rush this process, because that's how you get injured. So now, to tie this all together, I'm gonna show you an example workout routine with this 2 workout 2 set method. So if you remember, we have our 3 compound exercises that we're gonna do first, and then we have our 3 isolation exercises. And we picked the core 6 exercises, which is basically gonna constitute these first 3 of each routine. And the way that I like to split up the core 6 is that on the workout A, I like to do the squatting movement, the vertical pull, the vertical push, and then the 3 isolation exercises. And on the workout B, I like to do the horizontal push, the hip hinge, the horizontal pull, and then 3 isolation exercises. So here's an example using a core 6 that I would choose personally. So on workout A, you're gonna have your barbell back squats, chin-ups, seated dumbbell overhead press. And then for the isolation exercises, tricep extensions, calf raises, and then face pulls. And then for your workout B, you're gonna do incline dumbbell press, Romanian deadlifts, cable rows, bicep curls, lateral raises, and direct ab work. And remember, for all of these exercises, you're gonna be doing just 2 working sets. If you enjoyed this video, then you're gonna love this video right here where I go even deeper into how this 2 workout 2 set method is helping men over 40 gain muscle fast.